All right, let me just kind of go on my tangent here for preseason week 1. I have, now I have 15 notes. I teased one of them earlier. So, look, I watch NFL preseason. As Sam knows, Sam and I hope we don't do that fantasy league again this year. The thing was brutal last year, but we might end up getting roped into this stupid fantasy league that we do that nobody cares about, but that's the worst. Yeah, I mean, I on the Get Paid podcast, and I would definitely encourage everybody who doesn't listen to that to check it out because it's fantasy football and betting and daily fantasy focused, and I do analytics week to week, especially starting the regular season. But we're doing NFL team previews and everything. The episode was so packed this week that I didn't get a chance to fit this in, so I'm going to put it in here. So I do watch NFL preseason, all of the bits here. So let me just go through my notes. First, I talked about James Washington. My big question coming into the season is whether or not James Washington was going to be able to pick up the mantle, right? So they get Antonio Brown out. Smith-Schuster did well, as we've talked about on this show and the Get Paid podcast. The analysis and the film study, the people that I've talked to in the know say that Smith-Schuster was already drawing, wide receiver 1 type coverage by the end of last season anyway. So my question wasn't so much whether or not Smith-Schuster could be okay without Antonio Brown on the other side, because I was fairly confident that he would be. But my question was, who would pick up those 180-ish targets that Antonio Brown did? Is it going to be James Washington, who was, for lack of a better word, kind of non-existent in this offense for the last couple of years? He had decent draft clout, but he wasn't, being used. Or it'd be Dante Moncrief, who has kind of bounced around since his productive years with young Andrew Luck. But I got to say, after watching James Washington this week, I think, and I moved him up in my rankings updates, I think he's going to be fantastic. So I'm high on him. Hopefully, weeks 2 and weeks 3 preseason continue to confirm that notion, but we'll see. Another note here. So Denver is surprisingly competent to me. I thought that, and I still think that I think they're the 3rd best team in that division. I still think Oakland's going to be a little bit behind there in terms of win-loss totals, but I was curious. So they have Fangio coming over from Chicago, the guy that basically built that great Bears defense, fantastic last year. What was going to happen, this year? I think that Denver's defense has the pieces to be very, very special. So I thought that, maybe they would be winning, the games that they win, it would be like a 16-13 type game. Well, the offensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator they brought in came from Kyle Shanahan's system. He's kind of like a college guy. What was the offense going to look like? I theorized that it would be more like a Shanahan-based system, and from what I saw in the Hall of Fame game in week 1 of preseason, I'm definitely affirmed in that opinion. The offense looks like it's going to be able to run the ball, and when you can run the ball effectively, and we haven't even seen Lindsey and Freeman yet. If there's a bulk carrier, they're going to be a standout. Potential, I'm talking, you don't have to draft him this early, but they could be a first-round running back. I think it's going to be Phillip Lindsay. I think Freeman will get his carries, but we'll see how this shakes out. I want to see snap count distribution in weeks 2 and 3. So if you want to, check back in for my opinion, I'll definitely have an update there. But Lindsay, I think it would just be dynamic in this offense. He could be Clinton Portis good in this type of offense. And, Flacco, people kind of hate on him because he got a big contract after he won a Super Bowl. He is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. So with a good defense, with a good running game, and this can be a really good running game, Emmanuel Sanders coming back, Denver can be surprisingly good, and keep an eye out for the Denver starting running back, even if this is like a 60-40% split, committee. Both of these running backs could be good. One of these could be a star, so keep an eye out. Daniel Jones in New York, I think he was the best rookie quarterback this past week. He was making all of the throws, that an NFL quarterback needs to make. He was working the deep middle of the field, the deep outs, flag routes, post routes, short. He was accurate. He displayed an NFL arm, which I think was a question for some people coming in. Pump the brakes on the gold jacket at this point, though, New York fans. I think there's a lot to be excited about, but I didn't really see him scanning the field. I think a lot of those receivers were kind of schemed open. He knew where he should throw the ball pre-snap, which is a good thing. But I thought he was better than even Kyler Murray, which I'll move on to him. Kyler Murray, I liked him. But I saw all the press coming out of the game. He had a great stat line. I watched the game. They were doing a lot of sprint sprint left, sprint right, throw short type passes, which is, this offense will be. But keep in mind that defensive coordinators are going to adjust to that. They will be able to play short. They will be able to press the receivers. And if Kyler Murray can't show an ability to kind of stand in the pocket and deliver seam routes from the pocket, and if the NFL defenses, they're good enough to cut down on this. Now, I still think Kyler Murray is going to be good. He has an NFL arm. He has a lot of talent. I like him as a fantasy quarterback, but as good as his performance was, I want to see more progression in weeks 2 and weeks 3. So I'm going to be looking for that. But I'm not throwing hate at him. I just he did what the game plan called for last week. I'm just curious to see how he progresses this season coming up. Another note in Buffalo, Cole Beasley. I can see what Buffalo's doing in their offense. Now, they didn't play their running backs. I think Frank Gore got the start. LaShawn McCoy didn't play. Devin Singletary, who I like in dynasty formats. I still like him in dynasty formats, but I'm a little bit colder on him for this season. I think Gore and McCoy, assuming McCoy makes the roster, I think that they'll be getting most of the run. But, this offense, I think Josh Allen's going to be better. I wanted to move him up in my rankings, but the problem is the quarterback position's so deep, I just didn't know who to move him up. But I do think he's going to be better than I initially anticipated. They will take deep shots, and they're going to work the middle of the field with Cole Beasley. So I like Cole Beasley, especially in PPR formats. I can see what they're doing. They're trying to turn him into a Julian Edelman. This offensive coordinator, people were saying he's a college guy. That was wrong. He spent 1 year at Alabama, and then his whole 8-year career before then was with New England. So they're going to try to run a New England type offense. They're going to use multiple running backs, and they're going to try to work the middle of the field and take deep shots with Josh Allen. And Josh Allen will still get you rushing yards too if your league rewards you for that. So I do like him, and I love Josh Allen, weekly as a daily fantasy, type buy, a budget buy. Let's see here. Philadelphia, Jordan Howard versus Miles Sanders. I think that it's Philadelphia, so they're going to use 4 running backs this year anyway. I'm not high on drafting a Philadelphia running back because of that. I do think Howard looked more effective in the first week of preseason, but that's not to say Sanders is bad. I still think Sanders is the better guy to own there in longer-term keeper leagues, dynasty leagues. But we'll see. We'll see what goes. I did think Howard looked better. But like I said, they're all going to be used this year. So, buyer beware there in terms of usage. Chubb in Cleveland looked freaking amazing. Now that Cleveland has traded Duke Johnson to Houston, that opens things up. So Chubb is basically going to be the guy until Kareem Hunt can get back from suspension. Once Hunt is back, I'm thinking this is a 70-30, at worst a 60-40 split towards Chubb. He's just so freaking dynamic that they can't keep him off the field. Even last year when he was third on the depth chart, every time he touched the ball, he went for 55 yards. So if you're in a fantasy league, I moved him up in my rankings this week. He might be, in terms of talent, he might be my favorite running back in the NFL. Like him and Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, man, the more you can give Chubb the ball, the better Cleveland's going to be. And I like Baker Mayfield, don't get me wrong. I think he's awesome. I'm now a Baker Mayfield fan. I got to buy myself I'm going to grow myself a Baker Mayfield mustache. But, yeah, man, Chubb, man. Chubb is so dynamic. He could be, the NFL's leading rusher. He's just so damn good. Let's see. Miami's running backs are going to be better than advertised. Everybody's hating on Miami this year, and I think for good reason. I think it's fair. But, again, you got another team that's trying to kind of copy that New England template. I think Kenyon Drake is going to be, potentially a season-long start at the running back position. Definitely a season-long flex. You can get him late. He's one of these undervalued guys. I think, assuming he can stay healthy, he'll have value. And I don't know if it's Ballage or Ballage. I can never keep it straight. I think it's Ballage. I think he's actually going to have some value as well. And he, you might be able to get this guy undrafted. So if you're in a super deep, 20 or 30 player league, you might want to take a flyer on Ballage. Certainly if you're a dynasty player. But Kenyon Drake, he has breakout potential here. I never am a fan of Adam Gase's, who's now the Jets coach. I'm not a fan of how he uses his running backs from a fantasy football perspective. effective, but he's gone. There's a new system in here, and I think Kenyon Drake's definitely going to be the first and second down back. He could potentially even be a 3-down back. And, they used him early and often in that first week, and I think he'll be good for you. Baltimore's passing game, I think, is going to be a little bit better. Greg Roman, the new offensive coordinator there, knows how to coach running backs that are a little bit raw and that are more run-heavy. He was the offensive coordinator behind San Francisco when Kaepernick was there, who we talked about. And, he's going to be good. I like Lamar Jackson. I think he has top 10 capability this year because of his running ability. And, if he can improve his passing, even just a little bit, that's only going to make him stronger as a fantasy football quarterback. So I like him both in daily fantasy formats, and regular fantasy formats and the dynasty formats as well. Let's move it on to David Montgomery, Chicago's running back. A lot of people are hyping him, but don't forget that he has Tarek Cohen that is also going to be drawing a lot of reception targets. Look, I think Montgomery has the ability to be a 3-down back in the league. What I don't like is that he's moving his hips. He's being a little shifty right now. I don't love it. I want to see him be more decisive as a runner. But, he did make a couple guys miss on a couple of plays, but I also think it cost him a yard or two. And, when you're talking about shifting your hips a little bit behind the line of scrimmage, and that's, changing your yards per attempt from, 3 to 3.5 to 4 and 4.5, that's a big deal, and especially in the NFL. So he's got to be a little bit more decisive. I haven't moved him up in my rankings too much yet, because I want to see that decisiveness. I don't want another repeat of Jordan Howard last year in this system. I'd like to see somebody who can run the ball hard. They're going to have a lot of openings for him, and he's got to improve his vision a little bit. But, I don't think he's a lost cause by any means. I just want to see some improvement there. Kyler Murray already talked about. Melvin Gordon versus Eckler in Los Angeles, the Chargers. Look, the Gordon thing, it worries me. Eckler can move the ball. He can be electric. This Gordon thing could go deep into the season, and this, his trade request could be honored. So buyer beware on Gordon. If you do end up with Gordon, please, 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 and I said this last year with Le'Veon Bell, get the backup running back. Get Eckler, because he could be just as good for you this season as James Conner was last season. And James Conner was a top 10 running back last year. So you can get Eckler late. I suggest you do that regardless, of the situation, especially if you're in a dynasty or keeper league, because I don't think Gordon's going to be there for long. That's just my opinion. The Chargers don't want to pay him. If I was the Chargers, I wouldn't pay him either, because this offense revolves around Phillip Rivers. It's not a Dallas situation where Ezekiel Elliott, I really think, is a really big piece, and Dallas is not a Super Bowl contender without Ezekiel Elliott. I think the Chargers are a Super Bowl contender without Gordon. So, and I like Gordon, don't get me wrong, but I just think Eckler, I really think a lot of him. Tampa Bay, the running back situation there, if there is a starter, and Jones and Barber both got some run in the first preseason game, I do think that Barber looked really good, and if he gets the bulk of the carries here, I think he could be a special running back. He's another guy that you can draft late. So if you're that person who's like, I'm going to corner the market on receivers, you can get guys like Kenyon Drake, you can get guys like Peyton Barber, you can get these people later, in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even carry on Johnson, who I think could have monster potential in Detroit this week. You can get these guys later. I don't favor that strategy. I still want to get my running backs early, and I'll get some more running backs later in the mid rounds. I'm running back early and often, but if you're the person who wants to draft Ertz or Kelsey early, maybe you want to pop on Tyreek Hill because he's still being drafted way too late, in my opinion. You can do that and get some good value at running back later in all formats, not only standard but PPR, or not only PPR but standard as well. Alexander Madison in Minnesota. Holy crap, he looked good. I think he could be the best rookie in this whole class. The problem with this is that he is going to be running behind Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook has a lot of talent, but what do we know about Cook is as talented as he was, or as he is, he does get injured. And Minnesota historically has liked to use multiple running backs. The offensive coordinator, I know Gary Kubiak was added to staff, and that's a really good sign for running backs. But the offensive coordinator that ran the show at the end of last season, he was still using Cook and Latavius Murray. I do think Madison will be used, even though Cook will get the lion's share of the carries. If you're in a dynasty league, draft Madison. And I do think that Madison's going to have value in all formats this year, especially daily fantasy. So I love that. Mecole Hardman, speedy receiver in Kansas City. Look, he's Tyreek Hill insurance. I said that on my Twitter feed this week. It's at TFS_Sean if you're curious. Mecole Hardman, he is so fast. And I thought Tyreek Hill was fast. Hardman is fast. At some point this year, Hardman, I think, will overtake, and I think it'll be early in the year, he'll overtake Sammy Watkins as the second receiver in that offense. And having Hill and Hardman on the field at the same time, I don't know who you cover. Hardman for Dynasty League people, look, Tyreek Hill is kind of a loose cannon off the field, as we know. I thought he was going to be suspended. I've just moved him to number 1 in my receiver rankings because he avoided suspension. He's on the field. He looks pretty good. I think Hardman going forward is going to take over that Tyreek Hill because I just don't see Kansas City sticking with him if there's anything off the field again. I think he's on his ninth life if he was a cat at this point. So if he screws up off the field, I do think Kansas City will part ways. We saw them do it with Kareem Hunt last year. So Hardman could be like that Tyreek Hill type of guy. So if you're in a Dynasty League, you can get him a little bit later, draft him. Last note here, Deebo Samuel and Jalen Hurd in San Francisco looked phenomenal. I do think that Marquise Goodwin will be waived or traded. There were some guys that started above them in the depth chart in preseason week 1. Bourne was started ahead of him. Somebody else has started, like some guy, I think James, if I'm not mistaken. But look, man, you can see the talent on the field. Deebo Samuel, who I've liked all offseason, don't get me wrong, he's to me, and this is what I think of him. I think he's like another Brandon Cooks of the Rams. I think he's that type of player. I think he'll be great. But I've said in my manual, in my almanac, and I still say that my opinion was once again affirmed here, Jalen Hurd has the ability to be a Pro Bowl, a year in, year out Pro Bowler. He is the perfect size for a Kyle Shanahan offense. He's 6'4", over 220. He's that guy. He's like that Pierre Garçon. I'm going to run that deep in, and I can run a go route as well. He can do that and have that impact. I know the Shanahan scheme very well. I'm very, very familiar with it. Jalen Hurd fits perfect. And Deebo Samuel, that's not to take away from Deebo Samuel or Dante Pettis. I think they'll both be great. I think the having those receivers on the field, Samuel, Pettis, and then, of course, Jalen Hurd, along with Kittle, along with that running game that they're going to be able to have, along with Jimmy Garoppolo back. The San Francisco team is going to be exciting to watch this year. We'll see how they pop. But Jalen Hurd, keep in mind, everybody, that he is an ex-running back. Another ex-running back who did well at wide receiver is Golden Tate. If you have that ability to make tough catches over the middle, and then you have that toughness to put your head down and run after the catch, and the dude runs a 4.4 40, holy crap. Everybody, especially Dynasty players, you're looking at Hurd, you're looking at Mecole Hardman. I love both of them. I think both will be Pro Bowlers someday, potentially even as early as this season or next season. I think Hurd, honestly, could make the Pro Bowl this year. The only thing that could keep him away from that is if he's held off the field early in his career, if he does something stupid in training camp. But there you go. There's my soliloquy. It's all about fantasy football. Sorry I couldn't put that in the Get Paid podcast, but there you have it. Very, very important notes. Check back. I'm not sure if honestly, the feedback is probably going to come on this podcast again next week from preseason week 2. If you're an owner of the Fantasy Football Almanac, you get my entire write-up from the preseason games. I scout specifically for fantasy football. If you haven't purchased the Almanac yet, it's available on Amazon. Just search for Fantasy Football Almanac, search for Sean Ryan, search for Functional Sportsaholic. They'll all get you there. And those preseason notes, the full rankings updates throughout the offseason, I'll get you some access to my in-season analytics as well. It's cheaper than some of the other books out there, and you get information out the wazoo. Or up the wazoo, is it, Sam? Is it up the wazoo?
It's up the wazoo.
Up the wazoo. It's out of the keister. Up the wazoo. Yeah, so there you go, man. That was a lot of talking, but I'm very comfortable talking, Sam.
I can tell.
Well, you're not the fantasy the fantasy nut that I am, and I know. I was
jotting. I need it though.
Yeah, man. Jalen Hurd. You know what I need, dude? I need to get in a pure dynasty league, not a keeper league, but a pure dynasty where you can just keep your entire team. over, and you have like 30 players, and the rookie draft is the rookie draft, or your draft is a rookie draft, I would clean up this year, because I would go, look, I'd let the other guys go with Montgomery. I like Montgomery. I'm going to let the other guys go with Montgomery. I'm going to let the other guys go with Josh Jacobs. I'm taking Madison. Because my team's going to be good, so I'm going to have a late pick anyway, right? I'm taking Madison in Minnesota, I'm taking Hardman, and I'm taking Jalen Hurd, and then I'm laughing all the way to the bank for the next 10 years, because those guys are freaking good. They are good. Well, there you have it. Good. So good. There's a show, man. That's a show. There's a show. You got anything else for the listeners before we go?
Nah, man, just be good, people.
Be good. Be good to each other. Love one another. Love yourself. Respect others. Talk to somebody who has a different point of view. Understand that point of view.